What's up, world? Welcome to episode 2 of the Last Comic Book Standing podcast. I'm your host, Rob, and I appreciate you guys tuning in again. This week we'll be covering Powers of 10, issue number 1, this little baby right here. Last week we covered House of X, issue number 1. Remember this one last week? Cool. And these are two different comics that are coming out, and they alternate release dates every week. And it's one giant story that kind of intertwines. So it's pretty cool to see the seeds being planted, no pun intended, in House of X number 1. And let's get right into it. Let's cover Powers of 10. Powers of 10. X is not X. Powers of 10. You'll understand in a little bit. I appreciate everyone that's following us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And let's get started. So if you guys remember the basic gist of House of X number 1, we basically left off where mutants have evolved to the point where they're basically gods on Earth. And they're letting humans know that they're basically in control now. There's this island that they're residing in named Krakoa. It's in the future at some point in the timeline. And they're basically in charge. And there's these seeds that the island is providing them with, which everyone from other mutants to different government agencies are interested in. Now, Powers of 10 basically takes us on a journey in different points of time. And it's a very interesting first issue. So let's kick it off. Here's the cover. And it opens up with a quote that says, "Here's the thing, Charles. It's not a dream if it's real." And then we see here why the issue is called Powers of 10. As you can see, each frame is a different point in time, starting with year 1, year 10, x squared is year 100, and x cubed is year 1000. So it's different points in time, and we basically see a outdoor festival, kind of carnival style, and Professor X is walking towards a bench. He's basically approached by a classic X-Men character named Moira McTaggart, but they don't know each other in this issue, or I guess in this storyline. They're basically exchanging pleasantries, kind of talking about the weather, so on and so forth. She tells him how she came across this fortune teller, and the second frame you see 3 different tarot cards, which are little seeds that the author is dropping, because there are places and characters that we'll see later on. And he basically tells her that he was smiling because he had the most wonderful dream of a better world and his place in it. And that's the opening line. It's not a dream if it's real. Now, Charles, Professor X, is clearly surprised by this and asks if they know each other. She tells him, "We go back quite a ways." "Who are you?" he says. "Why don't you read my mind, Charles? Read my mind and see." And obviously, as the world's probably most powerful telepath, he takes a peek inside her mind, and we're left guessing what he sees. If you guys recall in House of X number 1, Mystique, another character, Sabretooth, and Toad were breaking into this building and stealing a piece of data. Now remember, this is now year 10, so it's a little bump into the future from where the previous page was at. It's in Krakoa. Mystique is returning from her heist, walking through the portal, and she has this USB file with her. She's reporting back to Magneto. He's glad to see her, but he's noticing there's a couple of people missing, and she's explaining what happened, but, that she has the prize. And this is when we start seeing the darker side of these characters with behaviors that we're not used to seeing from them. For example, Mystique is about to give Magneto the USB drive, but says, "I have certain demands." And that's when Professor X steps in out of nowhere and says, "Do you now? Isn't it enough to help your fellow mutant kind?" And she says, "I need more." And he says, well, we have our own demands too. To which he ultimately basically tells her, we're building a better world, and everyone that's going to be living in it owes something. And now the story jumps 100 years into the future from the point where Professor X was on the bench. And we see this battlefield and these new characters kind of walking about the battlefield and finding different bodies, different victims, and basically seeing if they can extract data from these victims. Now, what's interesting is that these new characters that are walking the battlefield can basically pick up the type of mutant you are, your special abilities, and like I said, the data that your consciousness is holding. So, all the information that your brain is holding, they have access to it immediately. And we see someone telepathically communicating with this prisoner that's being captured. And it's a new character. I don't know if you guys are noticing that it's the first tarot card for the magician from the first pages. It's a character called Rasputin, and this prisoner is her sister, Silabel. So she's basically communicating telepathically, letting her know, hey, I'm going to do my best to try to save you. Just hang tight. Let me chop a couple of robots up, a couple of enemies up, and I'll try to get you out of here as fast as possible in one piece. And we just see Rasputin go to town, man. I mean, she takes on these two characters on her own. Meanwhile, she does have someone with her that is using these seeds from cocoa to build a portal. So now we're seeing how these different seeds can be utilized. So he literally throws them on the ground, man, and within seconds, a portal starts opening up. And that's pretty amazing. Because what that allows you to do, in essence, is if you're in a bind and you need to haul ass, you can basically chuck a couple of these bad boys on the ground, man, and get out of there before, your head's chopped off or you're captured. The problem is that as she's racing towards the portal and fighting everyone off, they capture her sister. And she's trapped in this yellow force field. And she's basically like, man, get out of here, man. Just leave me alone. Get out of here. Just save yourself. In this next scene, we open up in what's called the Tower of Nimrod. And Nimrod, in the old X-Men stories, was basically the ultimate sentinel. They had taken these robot sentinels, which were made to hunt down mutants and capture them, and spliced Mystique's DNA somehow with the Sentinels and made this uber Sentinel that could travel time, walk through walls. I mean, just do whatever it needed to do to be the best dog the bounty hunter for mutants. And we see the team bringing in Rasputin's sister, and it's interesting how they refer to one another by their species. So, for example, think of it as meeting someone and going, "Whoa, you're an Asian. Oh, you're a Martian." They're not really referring to each other by their names. Nimrod, the pink and gray robot, is basically letting Rasputin's sister know, "Hey, you're an experiment. You're called a hound. You're made to hunt mutants. And I'm really sorry for what we did to you guys, because the issue reveals that there have been some experiments to splice mutant DNA and just keep creating different types of mutants. And the hounds are one of these types of experiments. And they're like, standard interrogation protocols don't really work on your species, so we're going to have to give you a bath." And basically, it's sort of like a capsule with this liquid that breaks you down to your brain's information. It turns you into data. So imagine if someone could place you somewhere and break your consciousness down to data, which they can then study, review, and read. It's insane. And that's how they're going to extract information from this character, Silabel, Rasputin's sister. And then we see the characters finally go through the portal. Rasputin The other character that threw the seeds on the ground, I'm sorry, I can't recall the name, but they are met by Wolverine, a version of Groot, and a version of Magneto. And they're basically like, hey, I know there were more of you. We saw 2 on the radar. What happened? She's like, hey, man, so-and-so got caught. This other dude died, but we've got it. Basically, they went over there for something. And Wolverine goes, all right, well, let's go see the old man. So who the old man is, I guess we'll find out in a future issue. And now we get to the closing scene, which is part of the X cubed future, which is 1,000 years from when Professor X was sitting on that bench with Moira McTaggart. And we basically are introduced to the archive of Nimrod the Greater. So remember, Nimrod was 100 years into the future. So this is now his library. And what they've basically done is everyone he's ever given a bath to, because now Nimrod is this little kind of drone that's flying around. And then this character is letting us know that they've basically taken the collective consciousness of basically every single mutant and made a living database of mutants in order to provide a tactical advantage in war. So imagine every single human on Earth and all of their knowledge, all of their memories, all of their thoughts, all being broken down, and it's basically its own entity, its own life force. Energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. So all of this data, it's now being used to cultivate a new generation of mutants. And as you see in the final frame, it's kind of like an Adam and Eve. Imagine being able to take all of the memories, all of the knowledge of every single human that's ever existed, and using that data and that energy to create new, evolved humans. Imagine the possibilities. And to close it off, we're left with a quote by Rasputin. It says, "You've forgotten that machines have no soul, and that the humans lost theirs a long time ago." What was Rasputin after? Why are mutants being broken down into data? We'll find out in future issues.
And there you have it, guys. That is issue number 1 of Powers of 10. I look forward to reading House of X issue number 2 next week, just to see how the story evolves. I do have some questions that I'm looking forward to seeing how the story plays out, see if we get some answers. But the characters are definitely developing. And as always, please follow us on Facebook at The Last Comic Book Standing, Instagram also, and Twitter, it's at TLCBS Podcast. Also on Gmail, email me any questions that you guys have at thelastcomicbookstanding@gmail.com. As far as my musical recommendation, put on any Billie Eilish song for this Powers of 10 issue number 1. I really feel like her music matched the vibe, and at least personally for me, for this issue. Let me know if you guys felt differently and what soundtrack you guys added during your reading experience. I'd love to hear from you. So remember, lastcomicbookstanding@gmail.com. We look forward to seeing you guys next week. Keep up with Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and I'll see you guys then. Peace.